So I wanted to talk about asynchronous discussion in online learning because they're the most commonly used tool in online learning, apart from lecture capture videos, which are really terrible. The problem with asynchronous discussions in online learning is that if you build it, they won't come. You can't just put some readings up or a discussion prompt and expect it to happen. So I want to talk a little bit about how I've come to use them. The weekly or topic cycle that I have is a 2 or 2.5 post cycle. And it goes through a series of steps. And it's important you know these. The most common and the simplest framework for remembering this is TIER. Trigger, exploration, integration, and resolution. That comes from the Community of Inquiry framework. There are other, more complicated frameworks, but they all follow the same general pattern. And you need to have some understanding of those if you're going to make asynchronous discussions work. So you need to choose some readings. I generally go with 3. I'm lucky, my class sizes are small, rarely more than 30. So with 3 I can get a reasonable distribution of readings around the class group. If you have a larger class, if you have 300 people, you may need to divide the class into subgroups in order to avoid the problem of people being intimidated by the person who posts first and feeling they have nothing to add to the discussion. You need to pick a limited number of readings. Remember that students, particularly those who've come to college in first year, can't read academic articles. They've not generally learned how to do that. In practical terms, they won't. They have other courses, they have real life, most of them have jobs now. There's a limit to how much you can expect them to read. So you need to bear this in mind in picking the readings. So in any given cycle, the first post the first thing I would do is I would identify where they are, particularly in the first week of the course. So in terms of evaluation of sources and location of sources, I'd ask them about their own search strategies. I would ask them to make notes if it's a game design course about what their knowledge and experience of gaming is. I want them to get that written down. And then, having made a note of that, to then go and explore the readings. So these 2 things come together for the first posting in the week. Some identification or statement of where they're starting from, and then a discussion of how that matches up with what they found in the readings. Then the second half of the week, I would ask them to read across the whole discussion thread and review what other people have said, reply to some of them, draw things together, look for common ground, look for differences, look for problems and issues. So try to integrate the discussion together and find things that will knit it together so that you can have the resolution. In terms of feedback and interaction, you have to be active, you have to be encouraging as the posting goes on. Remember, they can't see you nodding in agreement when they post something. So you've got to give in the discussion forums the sort of signals that we take for granted in a face-to-face class discussion. Use your replies to the threads to draw attention to interesting points, building towards the second phase of the discussion and the integration. Avoid being negative, never say no. Try using phrases like yes but or yes and to move the discussion along. Build the narrative with the students, very much in the way that a good games master in a D&D game will do. The resolution then of bringing the discussion together. When I'm teaching a blended class, we do that in class. The students know this is coming. They're generally graded on their discussion posts, so this is part of an open, shared, collaborative process, so it's not a surprise to them when we come into class and I put the discussion thread up on the projector and go through it and pick out the interesting, the challenging, the good posts as examples of how to do it right. Never pick out the bad ones. Never highlight something and say that it's bad in front of the class. Do that privately if people are struggling, but you need to get a couple of weeks in there before you start helping people out with that. If it's a totally online course, then that resolution and that drawing together will have to happen when you create a link to the next week's topic. And the resolution of the discussion, if you've organized your sequence of topics well, should lead from one to the next. So the things that emerge from 1 week's readings should feed into the next topic and set up the next discussion topic in a nice, easy sort of link. So that's your trigger, exploration, integration, resolution cycle. When you get a couple of weeks in to using asynchronous discussions as a mode of teaching, it is only fair that you explain to the students how this works. Explain the cycle. Show them some of the research on the community of inquiry, or the other models of online discussion and the research. And there's quite a lot of research out there where people have analysed online asynchronous discussions to see how they work and how well or how badly they work. There's lots of examples from many disciplines that you can actually explain this to the students, give them some of the research to read, help them to understand how the game works so they can play the game a little bit better. Increasingly these days, we're operating in a world where we're going to have to do a lot more work online. So therefore, your students, as part of their professional competence, once they get out in the big world out there, need to be able to lead and moderate and grow and make online discussions work successfully. So you need to explain to them how it works. Okay.